Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webinar on countryside conservation, which is jointly organized by Hong Kong Architecture Center, Hong Kong Institute of Urban Design, and Professional Green Building Council. We have three moderators here. I'm Tony Yip, Chairman of Architecture Center, and this is Mr. Benny Chen, Vice President of Hong Kong Institute of Urban Design, and this is Mr. Joe Chen, Chairman of Professional Green Building Council. And we have three speakers online, Professor Stephen Tan, Mr. David Au, and Mr. Humphrey Wong. Today, we have almost 300 registrations. Before we start the webinar, let me briefly introduce our three organizations, as we have audience from different backgrounds. First, the Hong Kong Institute of Urban Design, HKIUD, established at June 2010, is a group of professionals who aim at promoting urban design through accreditation, discussion, and education. HKIUD core members are all existing members of associated professional bodies who have a long and creditable association with urban design in Hong Kong. The Professional Green Building Council, PGBC, was formed in 2002 by the founding members of the Hong Kong Institute of Architects, the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers, the Hong Kong Institute of Landscape Architects, and the Hong Kong Institute of Surveyors. The Hong Kong Institute of Planners joined the PGBC in 2005. The PGBC is a non-profit making research and education institute to promote a better sustainable built environment through professional involvement. Last but not the least, Hong Kong Architecture Center, HKAC, is a charitable institution of public character in Hong Kong, established by the founding organization of the Hong Kong Institute of Architects and the Professional Green Building Council in 2006. HKAC is committed to bridging architecture and the community and organize events for the public to cultivate a deeper understanding of architecture and understanding of the environment, history, and the culture. So today we have audience from the professional backgrounds and the general public. Without further ado, let me introduce the first speakers of today's webinar, Professor Stephen Tan. Professor Stephen Tan is the head of the Countryside Conservation Office, established under the Policy Address 2017. Professor Tan is the former Deputy Director of Architectural Service Department and has over 40 years of experience in architecture, urban design, and planning. He was appointed as the first head of the CAIDED office, overseeing the design and development of 320-hectare former airport site. After his retirement from HSD, he served as the principal consultant of a listed company, SLD Group, promoting wellness design for the health and of both man and planet. He is currently the chairman of the Prince of Wales Hospital Capital Works Subcommittee, overseeing the redevelopment of a teaching hospital towards wellness design. Professor Tan has been a non-official member of the Urban Design Advisory Group of Planning Department of Hong Kong SAR government. He is also the advisory committee member of the Jockey Club Design Institute for Social Innovation of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He has been adjunct professor at the University of Hong Kong on MSc Urban Planning for over 10 years and was the president of the Hong Kong Institute of Urban Design in 2016 to 2018. So let me pass the platform to Professor Tan for his sharing on the topic of countryside conservation, why it matters, what and how it's happening. Professor Tan, the platform shared to you.
Okay, thank you. I tried to share. Okay. Share. Okay. You can all see it here. You not
Yes.
see the PowerPoint. Okay, I'm very glad to speak tonight to share with you what Hong Kong's countryside conservation is doing and what government and the community are doing in countryside conservation. In the next 20 minutes, I'll tell you something about why countryside conservation in Hong Kong and why our office is doing on various aspects and our work approach. Then the improvement works by government, funding scheme in support of the community's effort, and then licensing on the challenges and what CCO, our office, is doing in breaking the norms and trying to set some new rules for licensing in the countryside. And globally, countryside has been a hot topic recently. And a famous architect and urbanist, Rem Koolhaas, has written a book and also staged an exhibition in New York's Guggenheim Museum entitled Countryside, the Future. And regionally in Japan, the term Satoyama in countryside conservation has been widely spread. And in our country, there's a top policy agenda, Yakho Mangin, announced in 2017. In just a few years, there has been a lot of work done in the mainland. In Hong Kong, recently, because of the COVID, because of the social distancing, people go to the countryside. And countryside is also a hot topic for our life. Here, I introduce you a video that has been shared by over 80,000 people worldwide. A few months ago, Hong Kong has been on the universal or global stage by winning an award. Hong Kong youth effort has been recognized and was awarded the first Cultural Heritage Conservation Award by the UNESCO. In fact, our countryside is full of ecological, architectural, and cultural resources. It's not just a background that we know that is full of cityscapes. In fact, only 1/4 of our land is covered by buildings. The rest are our countryside. But because of the remoteness of these places, they are deprived of infrastructure. So a lot of people have left these villages, leaving them in ruins. And of course, the culture here is fading. And even the biodiversity is degrading. Look at these images. The left is taken 50 years ago. You can see that there are terrace farming, a lot of paddy fields with wetland there. There is a very good biodiversity environment. Look at the right, which was taken just a few years ago. It's invaded by single species and the wetlands are gone. So in order to conserve the countryside, in the 2017 policy address, it was announced that a CCO Countryside Conservation Office is to be established to coordinate different efforts in countryside conservation. In fact, there are different people doing countryside conservation. It's just that there is not coordination. And government has earmarked 1 billion for such efforts. Apart from working by the government, we also support the community in these efforts. And we focus our effort in two places, Lai Chi Wo and Sha Lo Tong. Lai Chi Wo, you can see from the map here, is near to the border, is in the Sha To Kok area. It's the northeastern corner of Hong Kong. The village is already about 400 years ago established. And there are 200 houses. And in terms of location, it's embraced by the beautiful countryside, country park, geopark, etc. It's a very beautiful environment. And what CCO, our office, is doing in terms of approach, we coordinate and collaborate with different parties. We improve the facilities, and facility are the people in working. As we are new to this topic, the whole community is new to this topic. We do research and try to innovate new approaches and ideas. And of course, we have to promote and cultivate all the concepts on countryside conservation. Apart from seeking steer from the Advisory Committee on Countryside Conservation headed by Secretary for Environment Wong, we work with different parties. We have dialogue with different parties, including on the left of the image you see, we work with Hong Kong U. We had a Zoom meeting to share different ideas. And in fact, there are already different professors engaged in the funding scheme of our office. We also work with different government departments. And of course, different departments have their own role and they have their own perspective on countryside. They have different rules. But how to coordinate that? The private sector can't coordinate that. So we are the agent in coordinating all these efforts within government. We also work with villages. Now we talk about what we are doing. Now we talk about what we are doing in terms of improvement. As I say, there is 1 billion reserved for this work, comprised of two parts, half for our works by government and half to support the community. For government work, for example, we improve the piers. Piers are a very vital external asset because there is no vehicle road to Lai Chi Wo. And there is water access from Sha To Kok here. Unfortunately, there is a closed area. You need to get a permit to go there to ride on a boat. If you can ride on a boat there, it only takes 15 minutes. But for most of you, you can only go to Lai Chi Wo from Ma Liu Shui, taking a 90-minute ferry, and it's only on weekends and public holidays. So we are exploring different ways of getting people to go easier, such as getting to shuttlecock. Without a permit, can we are exploring. And for local access to Lychee Wall and the surrounding, footpath is a very important access route. And for carrying goods, we are working on ramps going from lower level to upper level so that the belt trucks can run on the ramp instead of carrying goods, carrying very heavy goods on the shoulders. And in order to maintain the natural look of the countryside, we are trying every method in using natural material, like the image in the middle. For repairing damaged footpath, we use stone. In repairing a retaining wall, we are also using stone. Of course, that takes much more man hour and it's more costly. But how to make a balance? And for toilets, and for visitors going to countryside, the most horrible thing is toilets. In most people's minds, toilet is dirty, very narrow, and it's smelly, and you can find it without seeing it. So it's not a good impression in most of the people of going to the countryside. So we are trying to do something to change this impression by providing eco-friendly, family-friendly, MIC, and smart toilets in Lychee Wall. In the interim, we are providing temporary toilets, and we're working with HSD in working out modular toilets, spacious one, with solar panel and sensors to clean up the air. So we hope that you can see and you can try these new toilets in next year. For going back to the village, by the villagers, by the indigenous villages or city people going there for staying at night, the most horrible thing is the toilets again within the house. Now, within the village, you cannot find toilets inside the house. You can only use public toilets. So to encourage, facilitate villagers going back to the village for residents, we are exploring with DSD on sorting out sewer as a system for them. A lot of challenges though. Also for drainage, there are always flooding after heavy rain, not only to the house area, but also to the farmland. Just imagine, it's so difficult for people to go there to farm such a long distance during weekends. If your farm product is damaged by the rain, by the flood, it will be very discouraging. And also, if your equipment were damaged, then it will be really harmful to refarming in these remote areas. So we are trying to improve the drainage. And also, we're talking about remote villages. So we cannot go there very easily. In order to facilitate study of the village, Lychee Wall, we have already done a 3D electronic map. We can use this just like a model. It's a 3D model. We can rotate it, zoom in, zoom out, measure it. Just like the image in the left, we're using UAV to do the survey. It's completed for Lychee Wall. It's very useful too. So we are expanding this 3D electronic map for the whole region around Lychee Wall. so that we can study how we can facilitate different efforts in linking up the villages to build in energy to these villages. Apart from government work, we have reserved half of the funding, that is 500 million, for supporting community in countryside conservation work. It's called Countryside Conservation Funding Scheme. There are different categories: management agreement, building heritage, cultural revitalization, and research activities. And just within 1.5 years, we have already approved 17 projects of over 100 million under this CCFS scheme, Countryside Conservation Funding Scheme, with most of them in and around Lai Chi Wong. And there are also other schemes in other remote countryside areas. For example, in Taiwan, we have a management agreement for the Sai Kung District Community Center to do the farming there, education, and some display, like a story house of this village. And also we support Hong Kong Bird Watching Society in managing the fish ponds. You can see that the fishermen, they harvest the fish for selling in the market, but we pay them, asking them to leave some fish for the birds. Just like the image in the middle, the birds can enjoy the fish after most of the fish were harvested by the fishermen and the water were lowered. And we are supporting Hong Kong Youth Faculty of Architecture in a research. They're researching Lai Chi Wo and the villages around for sustainable and inclusive conservation methods. And CUHK's Faculty of Architecture is also doing a CCFS scheme in a village next to Lai Chi Wo. It's called Mui Ji Lao, trying to regenerate a place by reconnecting people via a collaborative process with the villagers. And also we are supporting a community organization called Stories South and North Limited in adopting observing, reflecting, planning, and acting process. In this image, you can see that they are digging those leftover relics from the villages in their houses. Those villages, some time ago, some 30 years ago, left their home for UK. Most of them go to UK for a living. And I think they didn't realize that they won't come back here for these 50 years. And they were buried in ground. So this project is to dig out those utensils and try to reconstruct the stories of the daily life of the villages 50 years ago. In Hong Kong's Catholic churches are many in Sai Kung area, and we are supporting the diocesan working committee on following Thy Way in recovering, reinvestigating, revisiting these Catholic churches in Sai Kung. And also, there's another organization trying to revitalize Fu Dei Ao, which is near to the border. And it was a village by non-indigenous villagers. And those villagers were the workers for the Hong Kong Canton Railway. So it's a very interesting story behind this place. Apart from Lai Chi Wong, NPOs are expanding and extending their experience and work to next villages near them, like Kap Tong and Mui Chi Lam. And there are interesting projects like they are supporting camping, glamping, and some workshop with villages. And if we go to the countryside, taking so much time and effort there, we look for places to sit down, relax in a slow pace, or maybe stay overnight to enjoy the stargazing during the night and hear the birds sing or insects singing during the morning and evening. But in most of the countryside, we cannot find licensed guest house and restaurants. Why? If we go to UK, Singapore, Japan, and Taiwan, you can easily find those stylish B&B and village restaurants. We try to take photos with in those environments and share with our friends. But why can't we in Hong Kong find decent places for staying behind for a night or two and eating decent food? We try to find out the answer and try to find out what the solution is. So we go in depth in Lai Chi Wong. In this image, you can see the blue houses are the houses that David Au will be talking more about. They are trying to be guest houses under license. The brown houses are the existing restaurants in Lai Chi Wong, but they don't have a license. The green one is a village house that is applying for a license for a restaurant. But none of these colored places have a license yet. The reason is that the licensing system now is under different government departments and agents. And the rule is generally applied to Hong Kong and mostly to the urban areas. But for the village houses, look at this image. The windows are very small because of the defensive setting, defensive functions of those HKAC villages. They have small windows. So how can they fulfill the lighting and ventilation requirements under buildings ordinance? Look at the right image. There's a cock loft. How can you prove structural integrity, fire resistance? And look at the staircase. Look at the inclination, the riser and tread, and the balustrade. Can they comply to the buildings ordinance? No. Further, the land status. Even land departments don't have the full set of record of the villages. How can the villagers, the humble villagers, can afford to prove their land status and their lot boundary? can one say that, oh, Mr. Villager, spend 200,000, you can get a report from a surveyor. Spend 200,000 again for a planning report for submitting to the town planning board for Section 16 application, for applying for permission for you to open a humble restaurant or guest house. I think you all got the answer. We know there is no answer yet. So under the policy address 2020, just issued a few months ago, the chief executive, after her visit with me and Secretary for Environment, she has deep feeling of how bad it is now for the villagers to apply for a license. So in her recent policy address, in order to support ecotourism and better serve visitors and help revitalize desolate villages, our office will work with relevant bureaus, departments to jointly develop a set of licensing requirements and procedural guidelines designed especially for guest houses and catering business in the countryside areas, making reference to the special nature and restrictions of the rural setting. We have to work with different bureaus and hope that all the participants here can share with our office your wisdom in how to break along, how to help our ecotourism. To end my presentation, I share with you a short video, but it's in Cantonese.
例如呢個客家圍村蘊藏數百年歷史，屋舍儼然，但係曾幾何時幾乎荒廢。2018年，政府成立鄉郊保育辦公室，簡稱鄉郊辦，支持復育偏遠鄉郊，桃花源可望重現。
我喺 CCO 咧就係負責一啲鄉郊設施改善嘅前期規劃工作啦。咁你有冇去邊度行？
去咗荔枝窩度行啦，因為嗰度有個太平清醮嘅活動咧。
我哋 CCO 咧除咗會資助一啲保育項目之外啦，我哋都會幫手去改善一啲鄉郊設施嘅。洗手間我哋會睇下佢有冇改善嘅空間啦。喺荔枝窩咧做咗2個新嘅太陽能嘅流動廁所啦，你有冇去使用過？
我覺得呢個廁所嘅設計都幾新穎，因為一嚟佢綠色啦，尤其喺鄉郊地方咧，咁你意想不到可能有個太陽能一個廁所喺度，方便啲嘅。雖然細少少，但係佢都好樂意用嘅。咁同埋去到鄉郊啲地方咧，嗰啲步道咧，我哋都會睇下佢嘅狀況嘅。咁我哋都會同其他部門咧去傾下點樣去即係修復翻呢啲爛咗嘅步道，咁就令到大家去到鄉郊地方嗰陣咧，就可以更加樂在其中啦。最深刻嘅經歷就係一次嘅清河嘅活動啦，由佢哋細個嘅時候已經開始做㗎啦，係人手咁樣將一啲河上面嘅沉積物就搬翻上嚟，咁就疏導翻個河水，等佢唔好咁容易泛濫啦。村民咧佢哋就非常之感謝我哋啦，咁我哋都打成一片咁樣啦，感覺上佢哋當咗我哋一份子咁樣咯。
喺 CCO 裏邊咧，我就有機會接觸到嚟自唔同其他部門嘅同事啦，即係擺一個臨時洗手間，聽落去好似好易嘅。附近啲環境有啲咩考慮啦？咁我哋會有漁護署嘅同事，呢個鄉郊位置夠唔夠穩陣咧？咁我哋又有工程嘅同事，另外民政處嘅同事啦，同村裏邊嘅村長去傾翻呢方面啦。呢個經驗都對我嚟講，我覺得係好特別嘅。
為咗集思廣益，去年中政府成立鄉郊保育諮詢委員會，又為咗同行復育。去年底，鄉郊辦推出鄉郊保育資助計劃，嚟資助非牟利機構等等推行自然保育同埋活化建築等嘅項目。為咗同心協力，鄉郊辦同村民、社會各界同政府部門推動3方嘅努力，好一啲嘅鄉郊已經設立
Okay, that ends my presentation.
Okay. So thank you, Professor Tang. Okay. Our next speaker is Mr. David Au. Mr. Au is a town planner, architectural conservationist, landscape architect, and project manager. He worked previously in the government territorial development department on new town landscape projects. Then he worked in environmental protection department, planning department, and the urban renewal authority. He is an adjunct assistant professor in Chinese University of Hong Kong and also Zhuhai College on heritage conservation and planning. He is the project director responsible for conserving and revitalizing the architectural and cultural elements of a remote village in Naichi since 2017. Without further ado, I hand over the stage to David. Okay, David, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, I go straight to my PowerPoint. I really appreciate that many of you have is now joining the webinar, and I think one of the best things of pandemic is that we are using a lot more these online tools to communicate, and I hope you can get something out from the talk. And I think thanks Stephen for getting a very good introduction on what we are doing, what things has to be done, you know, in this remote countryside. Now on this cover page alone, you can see, you know, some of the key elements of Lychee Wall, which is basically a countryside enclave. It is surrounded by a country park. It is a country park enclave, I beg your pardon, and it is actually sitting on the UNESCO geopark. So the sedimentary rocks of Lychee Wall actually connects all the way to Sai Kung on one piece. So it is actually a UNESCO geopark, and it is flanted by a marine park, which is the Double Haven Marine Park. Now, the position is here, you know, it is very near to the mainland. It is very green, and as I said, it is an enclave of country park, so it has a very natural surrounding. The accessibility, yes, it is a big challenge because at the moment you can only reach there through Guide-o, which operates during public holidays and Sundays. So during weekdays, you can only walk from Wugao Town, you know, which is a 1.5 hours walk from the area. But actually, the remote position of Lychee Wall is a blessing in disguise in a way, because I think it protects its integrity, the originality, you know, until today. This is the policy background, which I don't want to repeat as Stephen has mentioned, but because we have 3 people panel. Humphrey, who is our consultant architect, will talk more about the architectural side actually, but I would talk about the bigger picture. I would try to talk about as an NGO, as a client department, why we come into the Lychee Wall and do all we are doing now. Now, Lychee Wall actually, before today, it has been a pretty rural village, and people depend their livelihood on agricultural produce. So paddy farming is a very important activities for people in those days. Now, this is the aerial picture of Lychee Wall in 1961. You have to be careful to look at where is Lychee Wall, which is here. And as you can see, the extent of the terrace paddy field, it goes all the way to the to today's Mui Chi Lam and Kop Tong. That was how people keep their life. Now you can see the word Long Chick Rice Terrace Field, which is, I'm going to show you a picture of that. And I really have to say is the Lychee Wall terrace paddy field is somewhat resembling the outlook of this Longzek Titan in Guangxi. So it's absolutely beautiful. You know, this is the aerial picture black and white in 1961, and this is about today's view. So this is Lai Chi Wall, and this is Lai Chi Wall, and this is the Double Haven Marine Park or Yanzhou Tong, and this is the paddy field area all the way to the country park. Now, this is actually something very interesting. If I could share this through the, this is, if you go to the YouTube, this is posted by us, and this is the 2018 rice farming activities. I could do that here. Hang on a second. Right, I will show you the I will show you the hang on a second. Now you can see the YouTube, which is very short. So look at it. This is a very exciting moment of the agricultural activities that we have been doing almost annually, you know, until the pandemics. We have this, I think it's maybe too short, and I will quickly recap it again for 15 seconds. So this was activity, but the music is very, very low, you know, so you may not be hear that, but it's a big day for the voluntary farmers, to share the excitement. And so this is the Lai Chi Wall today, which is an image captured by our drone. You can see all these paddy field and other agricultural activities around. I would say this cultural landscape was revitalized joint efforts of the Countryside Foundation, the Hong Kong U, and the Conservation Association, and also the Green Produce organization, which all put in efforts with the voluntary farmers to revitalize the area, because the village, which has the highest population in the 70s, up to like 700 people, most of them has emigrated away because of the poor condition of living, difficulty of life, and the paddy field has actually nearly all gone. So in like 2010, we started some of the ideas of revitalizing the countryside. And in 2011, we formed the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation and start looking at refarming the area, recreating and revitalizing the farming heritage in the village. And then a few years later, some of our directors and founders has discovered that, you know, yes, we start having a more decent farmed area, but when the villagers come back, they have no place to live. And the houses, the village houses, are all collapsing because of the lack of maintenance. Now, this is an image that I would like to share with you in one of the rooftop in Lai Chi Wall. When I was there and see the landscape there, you know, I actually, the first thing that comes into my mind is like a filming studio, like this Wang Dim Ying Si Sing in China. But Lai Chi Wall is a real one. Like 70% of the houses have this pitch roof, tile roof, original structure that has continued their heritage since 370 years ago. So this is not only rare in Hong Kong, it is a rare occurrence in southern China as well, with such a big village, so authentic in this character. Stephen's PowerPoint has shown you more houses, but to be humble, I mean, we are now doing these houses in our planning application and also our implementation, which I'm going to show you some cases that we have done. This particular eyeball survey plan, which I can share with you, is an attempt for us in the very beginning, before we start most of the work. In 2017, we walked around the places and found these red colored houses are those which have collapsed roof. Some of them are in a pretty poor condition. With the money from the Hong Kong Jockey Cup, we started in 2017 to try to seek the agreement of the villagers to join our scheme and redo the house restoration for them, with the purpose that some of the houses could be restored to the glory in the old days, and that they could be turned in for accommodation purpose later. In our mind, it's not quite the business model of getting guest house or hotel or whatever, but the main objective of the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation is actually to create some space for overnight accommodation purpose, so that when people want to come to the village to experience what Hakka life is, they can have a place to stay. So it's an accommodation venue, but more importantly, we call it an education hub, where people could utilize the space and the facility for experiential learning. So this is the intention, and still it is the intention that we are aiming for to complete in say 1 or 2 years' time. So at the end, you see that we are now aiming at about these houses, actually 15 of them. There may be 1 or 2 more as there's actually 16 here, you know, and mainly because we don't have the sufficient money to do the restoration work after tendering. So in fact, in the beginning, we are hoping that we can do 25. But I think we are slightly over-optimistic, particularly in terms of the tender price, because of the remoteness and the challenge of this old village. We can only afford 15 now, but we are still hoping the best could be done. Now, the following slide, I share with you some of the process of architectural conservation in the process. First of all, when we enter the village, we are doing a little bit of documentation and survey. One sort of word we like to use is CDE, character defining elements. Now, when we comes into these historical or heritage houses, we look for these CDEs. So these are the highlights of these old buildings. For example, look at this old window, the wooden shutter and the steel bars. I mean, they are original character, and the way they do the window is certainly a strong character defining element. And then most of the houses also have a stove upon entry on the right-hand side, and also chimney as well. So they are very strong character defining elements that we have to restore. And actually, coming back to the external elevation and the bigger architectural elements, the roof, definitely the tile roof or the pitch roof is the one of the most important character defining elements that in all those houses where they have this pitch roof or with tiles, we are salvaging the material and redoing them or restoring them to the older day glories. You can see these tiles are laid on top of each other. I mean, these are typical of Southern China tiling method. They are not glue or stick to each other. they are laying one on top of the other, you know, which I hope we could share more of these little interesting thing when you visit the site, you know, on the 29th. So like external walls, existing staircase, and interior great brick walls, they are all key elements when we survey these houses that we are trying to keep them. After a good documentation of some of the heritage characters, we find suitable contractor and start our work. I mean, this is typically, this picture is when we started the second phase of 4 houses in October 2019. I'm going to show you one of the things that I heard Stephen mention about, like geospatial survey, but we are doing it in a much smaller scale of a few houses because we don't have the money to do it. But this is very interesting. Look at it. So as we have used some of these modern tools, the drone, which have the video, they are actually taking multiple pictures on their flight path. So using 3-dimensional techniques, all these points, when they were pictured from different angles, could merge and form a vector point on a 3D model. So, and then this 3D model could, come back out and be regenerated to a 3D model for design and other application. I could redo this video again for you, just for the appreciation of the technique that the survey company has helped us to do. And these 4 houses were completed actually at the moment. So you can see the first 2 houses has all their tile roof collapsed due to the lack of maintenance. Sorry. This is taken from the back of the house, so the entire roof has collapsed. And after the typhoon, actually during my tenure in Hong Kong Countryside Foundation, there are 2 number 10 typhoon signal hoisted, and the first one actually has almost collapsed this wall. So for 2.5 years, we have to close this access because the roof has totally gone and the water has soaked into the wall. The wall is a mixture of ram earth techniques as well as some rubble elements at the base. But because after the disappearance of the roof, the water protection effect by the roof has gone, and water would gone directly seep into the wall itself, and the wall actually got swollen, and they are leaning to one side. So this is becoming a dangerous building. So when we acquire the site and start the work, we have to take away the dangerous part and redo the footing or the foundation for the houses. And for these 4 houses that we have now completed, the major character defining elements that we could preserve intact is the front facade. As you can see here, the gray bricks and some of the granite door frames as well. Now, this is the completed version, a picture taken in February this year. The wall is actually the original wall, which we have touched up, cleaned up, and with some new inserts as well. So this is a collage of the interior of the houses. From the first one, which earlier you saw, almost 80% collapsed, with bush and trees growing naturally inside, now become a very comfortable and I think is I would say a very nice place for accommodation in this village environment. Now, the only compromise that we have to do instead of keeping the original is we put in toilets. Now, all these houses, when they return, when they join our scheme, you know, particularly these 4, none of them have any toilet inside. So we built the toilet with septic tank and soap away pit, and they have the shower facility. We keep the interior stove and the chimneys, and restore some of the original furniture and fixtures there, and we built more comfortable beds. That's, I would say, it's, you know, of course we have to do community engagement with government officials. Most challenging people is not Secretary for Environment, but I think our Fire Services Department colleagues has a lot of questions to ask about how we are doing with various things. This picture, Stephen has shown, the visit by Mrs. Carrie Lam. And also, apart from the houses, which is the hardware, now the Countryside Foundation has also a lot to do with engaging the villagers and participating with the activities. I mean, when we talk about revitalizing the houses, the tangible part, of course, is the physical building. But the intangible heritage is also very important to us. It's the spirit of the project as well. So we are using some of the activities as the backbone of our functions. As I said, we are hoping to turn this accommodation facility to an education hub. So for people who come here, we want to engage them to some HKAC activities. Now you can go farming, you can go the paddy field, or you can make some HKAC tea cake, or join some of the eating feast facility as well. Of course, we are meeting challenges as well. For example, this is our chairman, Mr. Lam Chiu Ying, who is talking to the village. And that is a special annual general meeting just to talk about, shall we or shall we not install air conditioner in the village? I think to most of us, you know, air conditioning is almost a must today for village for our living. But in a village, there are still debates. We are making compromise in a way that we have installed air conditioning facility, but we are encouraging people not to use it unless necessary. And we also try our best to install air conditioner at the right position in order not to disturb surrounding neighborhoods as well. So we also have to do regular reporting to stakeholders who are villagers, new villagers, and people who are interested in the village. We have other people joining us, like Engineers Without Border. I go to the TV program, radio program to talk about the project. Hope that more people know about the place and offer constructive ideas. I mean, like tonight, that I would welcome you to give me more ideas to how to make it better. You know, this activity, engaging chairman of North District Council, etc. Other activities in the cultural and experiential learning program, working with other nearby villages as well. The Lai Chi Ward is a core area where it is part of the central core of 7 villages, which they call Hing Chun Yue. The Hing Chun Yue complies like Mui Zi Lam, Sor Lo Pun, and Xiu Tan, Sam etc. You know, these nearby villages actually are dependent on Lai Chi Ward for transportation and other facilities as well. So apart from purely concentrating our effort in Lai Chi Ward, the HKAC culture and other activities somehow are also connected with them. And the activities we organize include farming activities, inter-village walk, natural scenery, you know, experience. And at the end, we actually have produced 12 live experiential learning activities program. And these programs, we have trained big group of trainers, so that in the future, when we have these house activities properly open to the public, we also hope the people who come here to participate in these experiential learning activities as part of their more remarkable experience. And apart from what we have done so far, and in contemplation that we, with the help of the Countryside Conservation Office, we hope to get some license for hostel operation. We are looking at possibility of helping some villages to get a licensed food operation in this remote area. So we are currently conducting this feasibility study of licensed food business in remote old village based on Lai Chi Wo example. We have organized workshop in Lai Chi Wo in other area like Gat O and nearby villages as well. The other thing is, because we have this experience in carrying out heritage craftsmanship, so in collaboration with the Hong Kong Historic Building Conservation Association, we have the funding from CCFS to promote more amateur experience on these traditional craftsmanship skills. And I hope you, from time to time, you look out for our, publicity and join some of the scheme, and that's part of our purpose as well. As we also mentioned, there are so much challenge in coming to the Lai Chi Wo. So from July onward, we are also looking into a study to see whether we can organize inter-village and coastal eco-tour transportation, water-based transportation from Ma Liu Shui or even Sai Kung area to come to Lai Chi Wo during the weekdays time. So the water ferry or water taxi or water bus, whatever, if organized, would help people to go to Lai Chi Wo and nearby village as well, including Ap Zhao or Gat Ngo or Sam whatever, not a monopoly of Lai Chi Wo, and also utilize it for ecotourism. To those people who are joining the Lai Chi Wo site visit on the 29th May, when you come to Lai Chi Wo with the ferry, enjoy your trip. Although it's 90 minutes long, but along the coastline, you would find some area which you don't recognize as part of Hong Kong. It is very green, very natural, very attractive, very scenic, and you can also see the hexagonal rock formation as well. So to sum up my presentation, I have to reiterate some of our central belief of our foundation, which we hope to bring in or revitalize natural heritage conservation with now the architectural heritage conservation, as well as the intangible part of cultural heritage through experiential learning program, promulgate and publicize to a wider public, and in turn it could help the recreation or the creation of a sustainable village environment. So this is my presentation, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
So thanks, David, for your very inspiring and informative sharing. So tonight we have the last speaker, Humphrey Wong. Humphrey co-established Metaphor Design Forum in 1999. Specializing in architecture project of cultural facilities, rural conservation, revitalization of heritage building. He also actively promotes local architecture for the public to learn and appreciate the history, architecture, and local culture through guide tours, talk, workshop, exhibition, and artwork, installation, etc. So Humphrey is the architect of the restoration of the HKAC village house and turning that into a licensed guest house. So tonight,
Humphrey will share with us his experience in this challenging project. And his title tonight is New Rural Living, a Viable Alternative Way of Life in Hong Kong. Humphrey, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for attending this seminar. Actually, tonight I would like to allocate my time, 50% for technical sharing, more on the technical side and the design aspects. Another 50% would be more on my own personal experience of this project, and that also affect my way of life as well. So the first two parts would be technical, and I think maybe professional architect and then and planner may be more interested to know about the project. First, I would like to talk about the constraint of HKAC houses, adaptive reuse, and the design response. How should we respond to the HKAC village houses? Actually, before that, Stephen and David had a picture of HKAC village house, which are namely, they're quite remote, especially in the case of Lai Chi Wall, is very remote, it's quite inconvenient. The footprint of each house are quite small, normally 350 to maybe 400 square feet, very, very narrow frontage, mostly 4 to 5 meters wide frontage. They are also densely clustered together. And amongst them, they are arranged across very narrow access lane. Normally, those access lanes are not more than 3 meters wide, normally 2.5, 2.6 meters, which are quite narrow. Most of them has very small windows, and the natural daylight and natural ventilation is quite different from our current standard. And two speakers has also mentioned about the inadequacy in hygiene facilities, wastewater treatment, septic tank, or even direct discharge of some used wastewater to the drainage, to the open channel outside the house. Also, there are also other issues like the inadequate public utilities. Say, can you imagine when, in case there's some accident, say for example, a fire, how long would you imagine the firemen could reach Lai Chi Wall from the nearest, closest fire station? It would be quite a long time. Fire services installation is another issue. And for the cock loft, it's also not allowed to access because of the fire rating concern. When Hong Kong Countryside Foundation is doing the planning application, they try to strike to see if it's possible to have the visitor to also make use of the cock loft, the mezzanine floor above the ground floor, to make it possibly as a place for sleeping. But there are many different concerns. One of the most important concerns is the fire rating of the timber structure of the cock loft. So in the planning approval, there is a condition that the cock loft will not be allowed to access by the visitors. Another very unique character and constraint maybe of Lai Chi Wall is it actually doubles with two very special status. Is a site of specific science interest, and as well as a UNESCO Global Geopark, part of a geopark. So it is very biological and environmental sensitive. So when you are carrying out the construction works, you are thinking of disposing of the construction debris and the waste. You need to be very careful. And of course, the biggest challenge would be the project budget, as David had mentioned, and also the time constraint. Originally, we are required to complete all the works before 2021. So we are aiming for these target, and hopefully we could complete all the 15 houses before the end of this year. But there are some other opportunities or maybe some other flexibility, I would say, of the hard coverage in Lychee Wall. Actually, none of all these houses are graded historical building. So they are a little bit more freehand on handling or when you propose new design approach to revitalize these HKAC houses. As they are not grade 1 or grade 2, so you may have a little bit more flexibility in dealing with the layout or suggesting some modifications. All you have to convince is the house owner and also Hong Kong Countryside Foundation, as well as the licensing authority. The last thing is that it's actually a living museum of Lychee Wall. There are more than 200 houses of different forms and different current conditions. So whenever you are doing your design and conservation reference, you can make reference to the houses around you. So these are the aerial view. I would like to, in the coming session, I would like to narrow down, making special reference to these houses. These are the 4 houses that David has just shown in his 3-dimensional, 3D digital, 3D map. That these 4 houses are 210 to 213, actually 210, 212, 211, 212, and 213. Why we choose these 4 houses as an illustration? Let's see. These are all the 15 houses in the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation's plan. Altogether, there are 15 houses. And we are narrowed down to talk more about these 4 houses. Let's see. The existing condition of these 4 houses, they are clustered together. And David had also mentioned the wall actually was in very bad condition with a lot of cracks, is in the verge of collapsing. So it's a very urgent repair works and required. So we can see from the inside, 2 of the houses already had lost their roof and almost most of the internal partition walls. But luckily they have the front elevation which are quite intact. And amongst all these 4 houses, one of preserved is the 213, house 213. So in view of these different conditions of this cluster of 4 houses, we propose a different strategy, a different way to tackle these 4 houses. These are the 3-dimensional model that we need to build it and to reimagine what's the original appearance of these 4 houses. It also serves as a good media to help to explain to the house owner and the villagers. So in response to the different degree of collapsing and deterioration of these 4 houses, we propose different strategy. Let's see from this plan. This is the plan, this is the house that Stephen and David has shown. Is the 210 that has almost all of them has been deteriorated and most of the wall has been collapsed. So there are more freedom, there are more flexibility in suggesting new things for these houses. And to the other extreme is 213, which is almost all being kept intact. So it's relatively, we can have more things to conserve and to keep and to make repair and make it shine again. So it's a spectrum of, it's a degree, it's a gradation of a different degree of intervention, architectural intervention. So in the case of 210, we have create a small opening at the roof in order we can create a small little courtyard that also helps to facilitate natural daylight and natural ventilation. And for the other 3 houses, we have different strategy to make it fulfilling the licensing requirement of a guest house. Say, for example, for this bedroom of 210, you can imagine you're sleeping in this original bedroom. It is very narrow. The bed is not even fulfilling 2 meters long. It's only 1 point something. So it's very short, very narrow house bedroom with only one very small window. How could we obtain license for this house? So we need a lot of negotiation, a lot of discussion with the licensing authority, and we need to talk to them and see what's acceptable to them. So we come up to one of the many means, which is to partially open up the cock loft. Say, like in this case, we open up a void, and this void makes the bedroom underneath that could also virtually connecting to the upper level. So we could argue, or we could make use of the windows, which are at the upper levels. So we could imagine the windows at different levels could also be serving the bedroom with natural daylight and ventilation with these openings of the cock loft. So the difference would be, in the previous case, if there's no opening in the cock loft, there will only be a very, very small window. So it's for sure you couldn't get any license for these 213 house. Same case, we open up part of the cock loft to make the natural daylight and ventilation of the whole house, that we can make use of the windows at different areas, different zones of the same house. So it seems to be very easy and very direct, but actually it's quite a long process, negotiating, discussing with the licensing authority to see what do they accept and what they don't accept. You can see this is the section of 210 with everything almost completely new built. So we can have a very big glass folding doors with very big windows on the top of it. And we can also have a courtyard so that natural daylight, natural ventilation could easily achieve. The other side of the same room, the same courtyard. So everything is almost like a uniform space without partition, without rooms. It's only a single interconnected space. Let's see from the other angles. So these are the cock loft, and you can see this is the opening that I've mentioned. And there are other openings at these 211 and 212 houses. With all these different windows, we could achieve the natural daylight and ventilation requirement. The other very difficult technical requirement would be the sewage treatment, the handling of wastewater. You can see the access lane in front of this small village house actually is very, very narrow. It's only 2.5 or 2.6 meters wide. Imagine you need to accommodate septic tank and salt away pit. And at the same time, there are existing utilities burrowing underneath this surface lane. So it is very, very tight. And out of this very tight surface lane, we need to coordinate and put everything in it. Of course, the septic tank and salt away pit may not be the long-term long-term solution to resolve these water treatment or wastewater handling issues. I understand that CCO is also planning for the next stage. Perhaps maybe Stephen could elaborate a bit after this presentation. And the next section is to talk about the rewards and challenges of the revitalization process. These are some quick points. Each and every of these points are very meaningful to me. Especially when at the first glance, all these houses seems to be very, very small, very minor projects. They're almost like a renovation of a small house. What's the big deal of a renovation of a small HKAC house? Actually, it appears to be a very small part, but it is a small part of a much bigger plan. This is what I've learned from the chairman of Hong Kong Countryside Foundation, Mr. Lam Chiu Ying. When he planned the whole thing. He implemented very patiently, step by steps. The first step of the revitalization of the village actually is not the house. It's not about the house. It's about the farming activities that David had touched upon. When there are more farms being revitalized, more people come back as farmers and have the way of living with the farmlands, and then started to attract more and more people to stay in the village. And then carry out the next step is to revitalize and restore the village, some of the village house, not all of them, of course. And then use this revitalize, restore the village house as demonstration to different other villages, and also from the rest of the Heng Chun Yak, the other 6 villages. He told me that recently he had invited the chief of the other villages to come to have a look of the restoration outcomes, and let them to have their own dream and see would they be having their own dream and inspiration to revitalize their own village. So this is all these are actually small parts of a much bigger plan. So the ultimate goal of this bigger plan actually is, after revitalization of the farmland, of the small HKAC village house, is to revitalize the villages one by one. So he is implementing the whole thing gradually, step by step, and with very good plan. That's the most important thing that I learned from Mr. Lam. And talking about the way to handle these houses, Hong Kong Countryside Foundation has also a very good approach. It's I would say a win-win approach. The arrangement David had told me is that they obtain the funding from Jockey Club Charities Trust, and then in return, Countryside Foundation invites villages to to express their interest, whether they would like to participate in this plan. The plan actually is to rent out their own houses for 20 years. And in return, Hong Kong Countryside Foundation will restore the dilapidated village house and make use of these houses for 20 years. Of course, every year the villagers can come back to the house and stay for 2 weeks. So this is a win-win, very innovative approach. It's not just paying money to the house owner and subsidize them. It's a win-win situation. And I think this is a very innovative way. And I think different other organizations, other villages could learn from this very innovative approach. So it's more like a matchmaking exercise. It's not who is willing to pay will get into this project. It's more like a matchmaking, who would like the house to be experienced by visitors. So it's I would say it's more meaningful. With this meaningful project, where we try to match the house owners to our renovation design. So we started with the idea of one house, one stories. We listen from the house owners and see what aspects of their stories could be applied to the design, interior design, and also the interpretation of all these different houses. So it is, I would say this is 50% completed. The other 50% is on, I would say now is on the interpretation and how to make the softscape and the operation and the experience of visitors to know more about the stories of each and every houses. Right now, it's only the completion of the hardware. The house is completed, the renovation work is done, but there are 15% more to be done. Another biggest challenge is the balance between owner's expectation and the guest house requirement. Guest house requirement, you don't need me to elaborate. It's a lot of statutory requirement, a lot of fire services, structural, natural daylight, ventilation, sanitary treatment, water supply, electricity supply, things like all the things like that. And but at the same time, you need to listen to the house owner and listen to what they expect. So it's a very delicate balance between all these two set of very, sometimes maybe contrasting requirements. in the first glance, it looked like a home renovation project. It's like fitting out for maybe for your friend, but actually it's doing a much bigger, they have a much bigger meaning. And the three other experiences, when you are involving in this project, you will have many, many chances to deal with, to interface, to talk to the villagers. And you will starting to realize they have very unique backgrounds, very unique characters and sense of pride to the place. Upon my last visit about several days ago, I just realized one of the lady who prepared us the dinner and lunch, actually he owned 2 Lamborghini back in UK. Could you imagine they have such kind of unique character and unique background? You need to talk more to them. You need to communicate more with them in order to appreciate and learn more about their stories and about their house. And the biggest rewards, I would say, is the assistance and the support from HKCF, and also learning, gaining the trust of villagers, and also with the very generous help from CCO. Actually, without any of these 3 parties, the project wouldn't be successfully complete. Now it's only completing, I would say, 50% of the houses. Battery is going to be complete by the end of this year, but without their support, it won't happen anyway. And the biggest reward to me personally, I would say this is a pilot project, and I have the first-hand experience of these kind of pilot projects. So I know all the pains, all the difficulties, and I also sample the first taste of sweetness and the first sense of joy of involving in this project. So these are the relax and the character defining element we collected, and we try to blend in all these elements into our guest house, our HKAC house restoration design. Use of local and traditional elements, but sometimes we interpret it in some modern ways, if the case allowed. The last topic is mostly my sharing of my own personal experience. Is new rural life a viable way of life in Hong Kong? It's just these small points. I would say it's not suitable for all, but it's the best for some people. From my personal experience, 3 years ago, I decided for myself. So I changed my pattern of work and changed my pattern of living as well. I started to go to my office only once a week and only if necessary. So most of the time is I work in my home and I live in the rural area, but although it's not like Chihuahua, I live inside the very rural area in Sai Kung. But I got the similar experience and I got the similar inspiration. So I would say it's occasional seclusion. There would be many harshness of the rural environment, but on the good side, nowadays we have digital connectivity. So in many cases, we have the convenience and all the public utilities connectivity. Most of the public utilities that we can still obtain are also very near. And there are more spaces and more choice of activities on the rural side. And also with more contact with nature, you could have different inspiration. I personally think have the experience that with more closer contact with nature, that would affect your my way of design and my way of starting design. It also changes my value of life, buy less, make and share more, only doing my favorite things. Here are some of the images that reflected my 3 years experience. These 3 images will end my presentation. This is the decent thing that I appreciate from Lai Chi Wo. Just from one night stay on last weekend. So in one day, one night, I could experience a lot of delight delightful things from Lai Chi Wo. Of course, for rural environment, there are a lot of harshness, and many people would be scared of all these things. Leeches, snakes, poisonous, venomous snakes, centipedes, big spider, mosquitoes, centipedes, monkeys, very poisonous spiders. Last week, a venomous snake in my bathroom when I'm taking the shower. So all these are the deterrent of city people staying in rural life. It may not be suitable for all, but maybe some people don't mind at all with to coexist with all these animals and insects. So these are a quick summary of my last 3 years living. When I have meetings, I have the meeting like this during the daytime. So it's a very enjoyable, it's a very, I would say, a very balanced way of life. All these images were taken outside my footstep, except this is taken underwater. All these images are taken 3 minutes, within 3 minutes walk of my living place nowadays. So I would say it may not be suitable for the city dwellers or suitable for everyone, but it really works for some of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Humphrey. Thank you so much. We can experience how your
and this last
right now.
slide,
because we experienced
this
your
last slide actually is this last slide is actually witnessing my change, the design approach. After living in the rural area and working intensively in the rural area, I started to change my direction of doing design. These are the design, in this case are the artwork installation. It actually has been reflecting my way of living in the rural area. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you again, Humphrey.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for 3 speakers. Very inspiring presentation. We are sorry about that. We are a little bit overrun for the whole program, but it's a really, really great chance to have the 3 inspiring speakers here. So we would like to open the platform to let all the audience to ask any question to 3 speakers. And we received some question on the chat board. So maybe I can speak out. Like we have speaker ask about which one first? Kieran. Okay, this one. So the question is, in view of the shortage in funding, I just heard mentioned, which is of no surprise to me. With the speaker, please share with me, how do you prioritize the conservation revitalization program? For example, do you conserve those buildings and areas which are most dilapidated first, or those which are most historically worthy of conserving, or those which are most accessible by the public, or those most habitable when conserved, or those easiest to conserve in terms of meeting all latest building and fire codes and regulations and licensing requirements, or those with the most aesthetic viewing value for visits, educational study tours, etc.
Is there a marking scheme?
Yeah, is there?
Maybe I answer Kieran first. In terms of revitalizing the villages, we provide a policy first, and then we facilitate any efforts on this conservation. First of all, the village owner should be the first person to say yes. And then, because it is private property, we need an NPO, non-profit organization, to consider a program for revitalization or rebuilding or whatever. But whether that action, that revitalization would help the bigger picture. That is something we have to consider on whether we should support it using public money or not. So it's best for the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation's mode to be implemented through the community, and the government, such as we, CCO, will facilitate on the statutory compliance or providing infrastructure or improving the access or any public facilities. So it's a tripartite cooperation, collaboration. It's government providing funding and policy and facilitation, and the NPO, the community organizations, provide the expertise, and then the villagers say yes. So I leave this to maybe David in the process of revitalizing the Lai Chi Wo village houses, and they have some priority lists in their mind of which to choose or which not.
Well, thank you, Stephen, for sort of introducing the questions. I mean, Kieran's questions is big questions that are worth a PhD study. Actually, you know, there's combined so many elements of concern. But let me share with you, Lai Chi Wo actually is not the first village that Hong Kong Countryside Foundation consider doing these, you know, comprehensive scale of conservation in both farming and architectural conservation, because I don't want to mention what has been the villages that we have approached before, but if we find some villages that we think we want to do some conservation, well, the first thing is we ask the people in the village. I mean, are you happy? Do you want our help? You know. So as Stephen mentioned a number of times, villagers concerned. So the scheme is entirely voluntary. And to share with you, like the two Chunjang, the village representative in Lai Chi Wo, has been very helpful and instrumental in terms of villagers' engagement. And then it's really the right place, right time, and the right people at that right moment that we can start the process. When we have the chief executive Jockey Cup funding, we have people actually go and talk to the villagers in UK and local and ask if they want to join. And in fact, initially, some villagers have some concern about what motive are we having? Are we behind some private developer who want to swallow the village or whatever? So villagers' concern is number one, if they want us to be there, and if we have the common objective to do something good. And then as it goes into individual houses selection choice, I mean, this is a little bit more intricate, complicated, dedicated. I mean, basically, we just ask for any villagers' expression of interest. And then in choosing these houses, there are a lot of concerns. Some of them, we have to look into some statutory requirements because, for instance, some of you may not know, sometimes when the villagers build their houses, the lot boundary is usually for reference only. So some of the houses are actually built not quite inside their own boundary. So we face a lot of statutory challenge, you know, when we face them. And then, you know, by elimination, there are a number of them that couldn't qualify our proper process of law complying restoration process. You know, that would be like that. And then, you know, we are also trying to within the group of buildings, we try to look for those which have more characters for us to go through this process. And as you can see, they happens to be in clusters. I mean, which is also good for us, you know, implementation and management. You know, I hope that throws some light to your questions. Actually, I may like to mention one more point. Mary Chen asked all panelists about how many villages. I could share one other information. So according to our survey, in the early days, Hong Kong actually have nearly 1,000 these sort of remote villages. And now the surviving village, big and small, would be around 600 of them. But many of them has been totally depopulated. Lai Chi Wo is one of them, which near to extinction, you know, in a certain sense. I mean, this is a rough figure. So if we are not doing some effort to these villages, I mean, they may all be gone, you know, in not too short time. And one of our vision is that if the environmental condition is going to degrade due to this greenhouse effect, we have a certain poor prediction that the last man to survive on Earth will be living in the countryside. Just like what Humphrey has said, you know, countryside may not be the best for everybody, but it could be the best for some people, especially survivor of this harsh weather and the polluted environment. Sorry for a bit lengthy, you know. Thank you.
So thank you, Stephen and David. We have two questions to Humphrey. Humphrey, can you tell us some of the major challenges you encounter in balancing the conserving authentic architecture and modern living? And the second question to you is, during the process for the actual revitalization work, do you have to get contractors who specialize in conservation works, or they are ordinary contractors with your close supervision on the renovation works?
Thank you, Tony. Let's talk about the second question first. Because all these are traditional hardcore village house, although they are not graded historical building, the whole client and consultant team agree that we should engage specialist contractor who are specializing in conservation of Chinese historical building. So we have shortlisted contractors. They only those have experience in Chinese historical building conservation are allowed to submit the tender, although they are not historically graded historical building. And the first question is what is throughout the process, any difficulty or what? Am I right?
To balance the conserving the authentic architecture and modern living.
Surprisingly, there are not that big struggles amongst different users. I've said before, it's a matchmaking process. We all need to talk and discuss, coordinate amongst licensing authority, house owners, and HKCF David and his colleagues. Surprisingly, there are actually many of the people involved. They aspire modern way of living, but at the same time having retaining part of the traditional hardcore village house. So they are not very reluctant to modern changes or addition of some modern elements. Actually, many of the villages they explicitly request, say for example, air conditioning or some particular modern way or modern installation, such as big sliding window, things like that. So there are surprisingly not that much of a contradiction, not that much of a debate amongst different parties.
Okay, thank you, Humphrey. So we have another question back to Stephen or David. We have a question regarding the long-term funding for the project. So can you share with us? Can you move upward a little bit? No, excuse me. Yeah. So actually, I have another question regarding how to make the right now the regeneration the financially sustainable. So whether to go for the ecotourism, is it the way, or you try to encourage another new local to stay there, or to develop a new kind of business to hope to find out the financial sustainable model to upkeep the whole district?
Maybe I answer this question. Like in the Policy Address 2020, just a few months ago, the theme is to support ecotourism. But what is behind? For ecotourism, it is comprised of eco and tourism. And we are promoting urban-rural symbiosis. Especially during this time, a lot of people find that the countryside is really lovely. It belongs to the local people. And it's our back garden. So a lot of people would like to go to the countryside to enjoy what they can't have as an environment in the urban setting. And in the rural area, now there is not adequate channel for the villagers to open a restaurant or guest house. So when the visitors come to the countryside, they don't have adequate facilities to sustain their tourism experience. So if we provide some funding, some policy to get these two groups of people and needs together, then we'll serve both the visitors from the urban area to the countryside. And as well, for the villages, they want to stay there with some means for a living. For example, running a family business of a catering setting or guest house. At the moment, the system is just discouraging. So we are trying to turn this around to facilitate conditions and regulations that govern the licensing system. So it's a very ambitious goal, but we hope that we can work together and make this a big change to make the urban rural areas and people mix with a symbiosis end. Whether David or Humphrey has anything to add?
Perhaps I could say from the Hong Kong countryside point of view, we are still aiming for a experiential learning hub in the area. Now, as Humphrey and Stephen also pointed out, there are still statutory procedures that we have to go through before we can get the guest house license to open it for public accommodation and organize our experiential learning activities. During the interim, we are trying to probably rent it out for slightly longer term, monthly terms to specialist group, including artists and people who may get inspirations through living in the area. So I really like to take this opportunity to open the forum. If you have any ideas that you have a group of people or yourself individually want to experience it for a sort of a medium long term, more than a month, there is probably some arrangement that we can do. And in the long term, we hope to organize it like an experiential learning center that people stay here and go through the activities. Right.
Okay, thank you, Stephen and David. So, George?
So I think now is almost past 8. So we would like to draw to the end of this event. But on behalf of the Professional Green Building Council, HKIUD, and Hong Kong Architecture Center, we would like to thank the three speakers tonight have given us a very inspiring talk. And I think the Lychee Wall project has demonstrated a very good example of a good marriage of a bottom-up as well as a top-down approach. And the result actually is inspiring, and we hope, I think definitely, if we could adopt this kind of approach, a collaboration between the bottom-up and also the top-down, between the government, NGOs, and also professionals to resolve the many problems in our society and community. I think that would be helping a lot. So I would say we're looking forward to the coming site visit to see the actual things on the 29th of May. And also, again, thank you for the speaker and also the organizations that helping us to make this event successful and can realize. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much to everyone. Just last remark, for the site visit to Lychee Wall, because we have many registration for this event, and actually we have the limited seats available on a first come first serve basis, and also the priority will be given to those and participate this webinar, join this webinar. So for the successful applicants, you will receive email on the coming days. And that's the end of today's webinar. Hope to see you again in our conservation series, the next webinar, and also the site visit. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.